In 2017, I was invited to a revival happening in Lindale, Texas. At the time, I was super excited. It was something a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but it was in an atmosphere that I'd never been in. But I was excited nonetheless. I'd never heard of Todd Bentley, but I knew whatever was happening in Lindale was big. I was hearing of all the healings that were happening and gems being found on the ground, and it was just something that I wanted to check out. So I remember the night that I was invited, asking my husband if he'd care if I went. And he was okay with it, so I went with some friends of mine from church. And it was a great time. I was just impressed with how God was moving in Lindale and what was happening. And then it just seemed to get bigger and bigger as time was going on. So it turned in from that one night, started to happen a little bit more frequently. And I remember even the first time I went into the prayer line, and trust me, it took a few times. It was outside of my comfort zone, but I remember going into the prayer line one night, and Todd Bentley ended up giving me a prophetic word that night. And it was big for me. It was the first time that I felt noticed by God in a while, and it was just different, and I was excited. So I remember going on Facebook and trying to learn a little bit more about Todd Bentley. I'd been going for a week or so, and I didn't know really anything about him. And so I found his ministry page on Facebook, and I liked it and followed it. And I even remember going to his personal page and having too many friends, and so I couldn't even send a friend request. And at that time, I sent him a message. I sent Todd a message on his ministry page on Facebook, just, thanking him for coming to Lindale. Thank you for allowing God to use him. And I was one of the people that you prayed for tonight and had a prophetic word for, and I'm just blown away by how God uses you. Shortly thereafter, Todd replies back, and yeah, I remember you. I'm glad you came. Look forward to seeing you again. And then not long after that, Todd even sends me a friend request from his personal page, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's awesome. It's Todd Bentley, and God's really using him, and so I was excited to get a friend request from him. So I kept going to the revival as much as I could, as long as my husband was okay with it. And I ended up going pretty regularly for a little while. Not a whole lot because my husband and I had kids, and so I went as I could, but, just whenever he was okay with me going. So at some point in our Facebook friendship and just kind of going through the revival, Todd reached out to me on his personal page, Messenger, and was like, hey, I'd really like to chat with you more. Here's my cell phone number. And he gives me his personal cell phone. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, awesome. Here's my chance. God's getting me into the ministry. I'm finally going to be able to step into my calling. And so, of course, I text Todd. I knew he was married, but I also know that I was married. And even though my husband and I were kind of in a rocky place in our relationship, I text my pastor and his wife all the time, and so I kind of just looked at it as the same way, this is a safe place. And so I start, kind of texting Todd, information about me, my marriage, and just kind of where I'm at. And we start building just this kind of friendship through text message, and he's like, well, you know what, send me a picture so I can remember who you are. I want to remember who I'm praying for, and I'm going to be praying for your marriage and all this. And so I snap him a selfie and I send it to him. He's like, okay, yeah, I remember you. Wow, you're really beautiful. And I'm like, thanks. And so he's like, well, next time you come to the prayer line, I'll make sure to give you an extra long hug. So just so you know that you're special to me. Susan doesn't really let me get away with much else. And so I'm like, that's fine. And appreciate that. Well, as I continue going to the revival, continually texting between Todd and I, and one thing leads to another on text messages, and he ends up asking me for a picture of my breast. So I'm a little shaken, but at the same time, it's Todd Bentley. Like, I don't want to tell Todd no, only because of his clout in ministry. And I know that's terrible to say, but I really felt like I knew it was wrong, but I wasn't going to say no. During the time that Todd and I were texting, as he was requesting pictures of not just who I was so that he could remember me from the prayer line, but also of my breast, he also sent me pictures of himself, but also of his genitalia. After each, conversation ended at the end of the night or whenever, Todd and I made sure to delete the messages. He's like, well, just be safe. Make sure that, your husband's not finding these or anything like that. Just make sure you delete all of our messages on Facebook or on your text messages. And so I always did. I didn't want to get myself in trouble with my spouse, and I didn't want to get Todd in trouble with his ministry. I really felt special and noticed and appreciated and wanted for the first time in a while. So he ended up inviting me to be an intern at the revival there in Lindale. While he was staying in Lindale, he was staying in a home that they had rented as a ministry. And during that time, I do know that David Hunter was also staying with Todd. Even as we were interns, I remember being invited over to the house in Lindale, and David would be there, as well as the other interns and several of the staff members for Fresh Fire. After all this happened, and Todd moved on with his ministry, and I was left with a still crumbling marriage and trying to figure out why everything happened the way it did and feeling alone. There was definitely times in the last couple of years that I've dealt with my own suicidal thoughts and just depression. Even now, as victims and the stories come out, with all the things that David Hunter's saying on his broadcast, it hurts. He makes people think that we don't even exist as victims, and that these stories aren't true, or that if there were stories that people would talk about them. Well, I'm here to talk about mine. They happened. And they didn't just happen in 2008 or 2013. This happened in Lindale, Texas in 2017. There's people like me that are hurt and broken and lonely and want people to know the truth. But that was a real hard season with my life. I knew what I was doing behind the scenes with Todd, just sending him pictures, inappropriate pictures, was wrong. Not only because I was married, but he was married as well. And then I was just dealing with some depression and, like I said, a rocky marriage, and it was just a tough season. But we made it through the revival and the internship. And Todd went on his way after the revival ended, and I went on my way. In 2019, my husband passed away, and it was unexpected, to say the least. And a couple months later, I get a text message from one of Todd's staff members. Just let me know that Todd wanted to reach out to me. And Todd wanted to make sure I was okay, and if I needed anything, to contact Todd. I haven't had any contact since. And that's my story. And when I heard Stephen Powell on Facebook, I literally thought I was the only one. I thought I was special when Todd reached out to me. But come to find out that wasn't true. And come to find out there were other women, and apparently men, that had similar stories. And so I wanted you guys to hear my voice. You're not alone. We exist. And we're the victims.